go. And then I'm going to share my screen, which is this one. Okay. Yay. And hopefully I can still then see the chat area and participants. Where's participants? So I can let anybody in. I don't know. I'm just going to go. Actually, give me one more second. Hopefully you can see this okay. Since I'm in a share screen, I'm going to stop this for one quick second. Okay. All right. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So, red flags, signs you need to, let me just make this bigger actually, if I'm able to make this bigger for myself. Yeah. Red flags, signs you need to take a dieting break. So, and I would, so as to not create more metabolic adaptation or slowdown. So, so it looks like there's something that just trying to pop in. This would be relevant to somebody who is actually, I'm going to back up a little quick second here. I got thrown off by a couple of people coming in. So when I was doing this in Google Slides, this was a guy frantically waving the red flag, right, on a racetrack, giving you an indicator that it's, hey, time to slow down a little bit. So this is the story or the analogy I typically use to describe this, because a lot of times, and there's example after example of this, people are, when we're trying to lose fat, are looking at things specifically through the lens of their weight or of some kind of outcome-based, data-driven point, right? Weight, clothing, scale, measurements, whatever. When ultimately you really have to understand that if you don't see this through the lens of how strong or weak your metabolism might be and watching for the indicators that might indicate that it's changing in a negative way, then all these results are going to be short term if you're achieving any at that point. So you have to learn to pay attention to these things. This is a really integral part of our check-ins. We do biofeedback check-ins, which is what this is going to be about, on a weekly basis. We didn't do this for the whole time that we've been coaching over the years. We probably started doing this, I don't know, a number of years ago anyway. But it's a really powerful awareness, because you get an indicator, you can have indicators that, hey, I need to take a break. My body's starting to resist this a little bit, so on and so forth. So let me just read this. Imagine a mechanic warns you that your brakes need replacing. You think, I'll deal with it next time. But a short time later, your brakes fail, resulting in a severe accident that not only wrecks your car, which in this case is your metabolism, but also leaves you emotionally shaken as well, right? Now, you're left towing your damaged car back to the mechanic, hoping that a quick fix might undo the extensive harm already done. It would be like thinking you can reverse a car crash by driving backwards. So real recovery means accepting that you need a long-term repair plan, not quick fixes. Jumping from one diet to another, looking for immediate relief, will only make things worse over time. So this is why we have to pay attention to red flags or to the messages, because they're really clear that I just need a break. Right? You can actually, and this is part of why, or the approach taken early on, is to, when you're really testing the waters, you're really always paying attention if it's good to proceed, because there's always going to be some type of metabolic adaptation in our age bracket and in our kind of hormonal environment. Speaking to all of everyone that we are around here in this community, there's already more sensitivity around this, because really nobody's trying to lose fat or work on their physique for the first time at this age, typically. So biofeedback was the term I used. So this is just subjective self-reporting on various health indicators which provide feedback about your body's physiological functions. So it's sleep quantity, sleep quality, sex drive, perceived stress levels, digestion, hunger stability, craving stability, energy stability. These whatever we want to call them, biofeedback components will always let you know if things are starting to go off for you. And you have to be more aware that it may be time for a dieting break, it may be time for a pullback, so on and so forth. So sleep quantity, I'm just going to try to not spend too much time on any of them and just make this really efficient. But sleep quantity. So if you're not, we know this, everybody understands that sleep is good for you and not sleeping is bad for you, so on and so forth. But it is something to watch for changes in. So this is the specific thing. Because when we get to libido, a lot of people are coming at this point in with low libido. So you're already losing that as an indicator, because when we're looking at biofeedback, we're watching for changes in these things specifically, okay? Changes. So sleep quantity. So if your sleep is going down in terms of how much you're sleeping, or you're actually just not intentionally sleeping enough, this is just going to increase your susceptibility to the need for a dieting break sooner, because you're going to adapt faster, period. So you're going to have a change in hunger hormones, and an increase in hunger hormones, a decrease in satiety hormones. And connected to this is a real undoing of how your body uh, wants to produce cortisol, right? So when I say diurnal rhythm, it's supposed to be really up in the morning to wake you up and give you energy. It's like a readiness hormone. And it's supposed to be down in the evening so it doesn't interrupt your sleep. So this will be a continuous thing throughout this, because ultimately the reason that we need to take dieting breaks is because it's become too stressful to the metabolism, right? And if you understand that your metabolism is just really a stress barometer, it's measuring and sensing stress, and then uh, sending messages throughout your body to turn up certain systems and turn down other ones. So if your sleep is changing, your amount is changing, understand right at the top, you're going to be more susceptible to everything else. Whenever your cortisol rhythm is changed, this is where all of the kind of slow regressions start to happen, because it's natural for it to be up in the morning and down at night. The first regression around this is to be down in the morning and up at night. So the obvious implication of that is that you are then tired in the morning and can't fall asleep. So sleep quality, inability to fall asleep, again, changes in this. If this is a chronic issue already, that's really, you shouldn't be dieting anyways. You shouldn't be going into a deficit, honestly, if you have a lot of these metrics off right off the bat, because you're going to add in the calorie deficit variable, which is already going to be more stressful then, because of all of these elements being out of whack. So the inability to fall asleep is going to be indicative of what I just mentioned a minute ago about this natural stress hormone production in your body, just kind of reversing. So low in the morning, high at night. If you have a hard time staying asleep, this is again connected to too much metabolic stress. So then there's more stress hormones circulating in the body. This is going to affect insulin resistance and your body's ability to stabilize blood sugar. So what happens is you end up having a higher baseline level of stress in the body. So let's say higher baseline levels of cortisol than normal. And then just enter someone. And then because of the insulin resistance levels that are connected to that over time, if you're, and this is also one of the reasons why we have to be very mindful of what we're eating before bed, because we can help this. We've talked about that before, but if your blood sugar then is destabilized because of this, then your sugar drops too much overnight while you're sleeping, which is an emergency to your body. There's a signal sent to mobilize blood sugar, to mobilize stored carbohydrates to provide that missing blood sugar. That comes from hormones like cortisol and glucagon, which are stress hormones. And if your baseline for this hormone is already chronically elevated, you're going to pass your wake up threshold. And that's why you wake up at the same time in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Unless you're drinking a lot of water before bed, then that's a water issue. But it's typically blood sugar dysregulation, insulin resistance types of issues. High stress is typically going to result in that pretty consistently. So again, these are signs when you see changes in these things specifically. So sleep is always going to exacerbate weight loss resistance, fat gain, particularly around the stomach. And obviously, the long-term health stuff is just chronic decay over time. Okay, next we look at the connected to this, the morning. I'm not even gonna let you see the next slide. Morning waking energy. So naturally, again, when stress response in your body is healthy and in the place it's supposed to be, we should wake up and have good morning energy, so on and so forth. This is called a cortisol awakening response. This is one of the reasons we've always suggested just to delay caffeine intake in the morning, just to let that naturally happen instead of just interrupting it or, uh, affecting it in any way, so on and so forth. So this is going to obviously reflect good recovery, right? Good quality sleep, good rest. You see, all of these things are going to be connected. None of these are actually ever operating in isolation. And that's the really important thing. I use a thyroid, I'll sidebar for a second here, but I use the thyroid as an example. They just a lot of times there's not really any questions around. So why now is your thyroid in a hypo position? I ask this of new clients all the time. So when did you get this diagnosis? Like how you weren't born with it. So when did it happen? And you see a lot of connections, and then no one's really asking what the cause is. It just gets band-aided with a medication to treat symptoms, so on and so forth. Not to say that medication isn't needed. I'm just saying that there's never really the awareness or conversation around why did this happen? And you'll often see things are connected. That didn't happen by itself. So hormones they're like a orchestra, like a symphony. They're all playing together. And if you pull one, such and such, the others adapt. They don't act in isolation at all. So that's really important, is that you're not really going to see one of these happen by itself, but if you do, that'll be short term, and then tends to be a domino. So there's always warning signs that it's time to take a break from the deficit and kind of rebuild the metabolism, take a break from hunger, so on and so forth. Just let things kind of normalize, especially if you look at this through the lens of permanent. You can lose weight in a lot of ways, not a lot of permanent ways, because they don't have a lot to do with the specific nutrition plan you're following or the training. Those are variables, but long term, those are just kind of tools used in the short term to manipulate change. Being able to manage and have a healthy this on the other side of that progress is critical to physiologically have an opportunity to avoid rebounding. There's other reasons that go into, someone's ability to maintain progress that have nothing to do with diet and training, but you have to be able to appreciate that fat loss and fat loss maintenance has to be seen through the lens of how strong is my metabolism. It doesn't even make logical sense that if it's really weak at the end of your diet, that you're going to have any luck keeping it off when you introduce a normal amount of food. So cortisol awakening response again. This can be from overall just poor diet, right? So you just don't have good, consistent eating. You're under eating calories. Maybe you're under eating protein. You're under eating carbs. There's just no plan, right? You're just kind of very passive or floating around with nutrition, or you're just inconsistent. So this can affect all of this as well. Too much overall output. So training too hard without like training too hard when you're not sleeping. If I had a night where I didn't sleep, I wouldn't train. If I didn't sleep last night, I wouldn't train today in most cases because it's not going to be a productive workout for me, or I'm going to take a little bit off and not really go hard, as hard. And that's really how you need to look at it from a grand perspective, kind of like how an athlete would. They're always kind of thinking about the recovery component of things. You're asking a lot of your body, you're trying to get a response. It's a performance-based process, and you got to recover. And there's always just so much gas pedal, gas pedal, gas pedal. This is the brakes, right? The brakes are needed in this case. So metabolic adaptations to prolonged calorie deficit. So if you're in a long deficit, long under eating, lots of exercise, high intensity stuff, when you have imbalances, so on and so forth, this is just chronically over time going to fast forward how you adapt to a deficit. Some adaptation to a calorie deficit is normal. It's totally normal. There's a normal amount of it that is associated with the pounds you lose. Lighter bodies need less food. And there's an element that is related to depth and length of time in the deficit, right? So that's just adaptation to prolonged stress of that. So not related to weight loss. So you're just going to fast forward it when these things aren't paid attention to. So next, libido. This can be a difficult one because honestly, most of the time, this is low in a lot of people at this point, and not everyone is interested or has access or even has a doctor interested in prescribing like testosterone for HRT, so on and so forth. So again, but we're looking at this from a change standpoint primarily. If you're starting low, it's really something that's really hard to use as a barometer. Admit. Um, so not too much to discuss on this one. Obviously, we know that metabolic stress is going to lower hormones. Progesterone will just take a nosedive when you're under a lot of stress. That imbalances everything, and it doesn't even have to be that your stress levels are higher. But when these sex hormones even go down, then you just have less defense against that. That's why the belly fat thing happens. That's a sign of exposure to high stress, lost sex hormone balance, and insulin resistance. So the next one is just pure perceived stress. So your it doesn't have to just be the stress that your metabolism receives from under eating or under sleeping or over exercising. Those have a physical response, obviously. There's the same stress response in the body. There's only one stress response. But you also know that your perceived stress, whether it be relational or work or, something that's ever happening, you feel that in your body too. Like, you know what I mean? You get anxious or you have that overwhelm in the day for whatever reason. This is a variable that's really important. And it's kind of one of these ones there's nuance to, because you really have to accept that some of it's normal, right? There's an element of stress that's normal in our lives from start to beginning. But you also then have to understand that in blocks of time, you may have a more challenging time with what you perceive as progress in a short block of time. And all of this means that your diet at this point is more stressful than normal. So perhaps when this is happening, you have a block where you're eating more, you're enhancing recovery through other modalities, et cetera. But metabolism is your body's stress barometer. So when you have the perceived stress, again, you'll see everything is connected. You have a disruption in sleep, increase in fat storage, decreased muscle mass, all related to cortisol again. It interferes with hormones that regulate your appetite and metabolism. So this is just leptin, your fullness hormone, ghrelin, your hunger hormone, changes in eating behavior. So if you think about this, when stress is high perceived, this is when we tend to cave, right? This is the evening type of emotional eating for whatever reasons. And when it's stress related, emotional eating, the cravings are for hyperpalatable stuff, high fat, high sugar types of things, calorie dense things that really kind of not only undo your deficit pretty quickly, they also just make you feel like crap about everything after the fact, which can become a flat tire equals 4 flat tires just to make it count. So we know that it's harder to lose belly fat when stress hormones are chronically high. So that's why when you look at this from a primary focus standpoint, that's really the whole element, is you're just trying to create some anti-stress in your body, because that's really what you're fighting against physiologically. It's not going to like necessarily counter your ability to lose weight, but at that point, the prolonged deficit is, because a deficit is a deficit. There's an adaptation to it where obviously there's metabolic slowdown, and then your body will just start dumping some lean tissue along the way to stay in the game, which at this point, I hope you can appreciate how important your muscle is, because that's the key to everything. So burnout, anxiety, overwhelm, which can make it difficult to be consistent. So these are all interconnected things. And again, it's changes. So we usually score it, well, we do score it on a 1 to 10 scale. So if it's like a 4 and it goes to like a 9, that you're gonna notice that in your digestion, which is the next one. You're gonna notice that in all aspects of the other variables as well. So this is one that is an important one as well. Digestion. So digestion relies heavily on the body being in a parasympathetic state. So you have fight or flight, rest, and digest. So if you're always over here, this can't do well. So you see this a lot in long-term dieters, competitors, hardcore dieters, low calorie time, extreme diet histories. A lot of those people have really they struggle with digestion. And then it's compounded because then you have nutrient absorption issues, which create other metabolic issues just because of a lack of the ability for your body to uptake certain things. So this is like just by the whatever you call, fight or flight and rest and digest, they represent something. So even if just in the choice of words to describe the parasympathetic state, digestion, stress is probably one of the largest triggers for digestive issues over time, whether that be just, again, perceived and psychological and mental emotional stuff, or actual chronic physical or physiological stuff over time. So we always call it sympathetic overdrive. So this is stuck in the high stress state. And again, just to re-emphasize that the recovery component of the entire process is really what's underwriting everybody's success that's having success. So this is going to take blood flow and attention and energy away from digestion. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If you were in the wild and you're a deer and you see a lion, fight or flight, right? So your body is mobilizing energy very quickly to run or to fight. And digestion doesn't matter at that point. So it's off. In nature, though, once safe, then that animal's sympathetic nervous system winds down and relaxes, and they move back into a parasympathetic state. Holy cow, stuttering. But we're stuck in that state too much, so that really doesn't ever get turned off properly in a lot of people that are, for whatever reasons, are in that metabolic state. So same thing with sex hormones. If you are in this fight or flight, stuck sympathetic state, then reproduction, things like that, they don't really matter in that survival-based state, which is why we see progesterone and estrogen and testosterone so affected by high stress, under eating, over exercising, adding time to that, so on and so forth. So this also slows down GI motility, so how fast things are flowing through your system. So digestion is slow, it's sluggish, so you have less enzyme production, lower gastric secretion of those enzymes, and then food's sitting there longer. So you have that heavy, bloated, kind of stuck feeling. And that ultimately leads to irregular bowel movements. So there's obviously a lot of potential causes for GI issues. I'm talking about changes again, where this is decayed over time in people. So ultimately, what helps this is more food, believe it or not. So on a climb in calories, for somebody who has these issues, they're at first going to say, well, I'm experiencing extra bloating and extra discomfort. I'm even feeling a little bit puffier. And it's the same kind of thing with a lot of things. Put your head down, stick it out. You'll see you'll adapt. That water, that bloat, that discomfort will drop and you'll stabilize. It's the same thing with bumping calories for metabolic reasons. This is one of those metabolic reasons because it's kind of rebalancing the seesaw. You're stuck too much over here. We're adding weight here. So you see an improvement in digestion because now that person can digest more food than they could before, which was obviously an uncomfortable level at the first bump. So bloating and irregular bowels are symptoms of digestive stress. One of the first ones to show up too, actually. Hunger stability. So hunger, craving, and energy stability. And that's the key, right? So obviously there's going to be some expected changes around hunger. You should be hungry to a degree if you're successfully losing fat and eating in a calorie deficit. That's normal. That's biologically normal. That's what should happen when you reduce your food intake, when your body's trying to get you not to do that. So the key here is if you have a lot of really wild hunger, like high hunger, then that's just not good. And if you have no hunger or really low hunger, this is also not good. So the low hunger, not biologically normal. So that's a very quick red flag when kind of appetite and hunger disappears in a deficit, that there is a need to, and it's ironic because you don't have hunger, but you got to start eating more food. So dysregulation. So when you have intense hunger, I wrote dysregulation of your hunger hormones, your satiety hormones with prolonged dieting and low hunger in a deficit, not biologically normal, like I said. So that's downregulated metabolism from prolonged deficit eating. The issue again will be instability. So going from like having really hungry days to really low hunger days, so on and so forth. So this is when your body is struggling to maintain any type of hormonal regulation or consistency, because that kind of wild fluctuation in hunger is only happening because there's a wild fluctuation in the hormones that are responsible for hunger. And what we're looking for is stability in these areas as much as possible. So again, it's the instability and the fluctuations with hunger. It's the exact same thing here with cravings. So normal cravings, which are normal, these are most often associated with emotional triggers, right? And everybody has them. They're kind of a real thing from start to finish. They're never going to go away. They're not abnormal. They're not actually even typically based on actual hunger. So there's an element of those that you have to just accept and know they're we always say, you know, this too shall pass, treat them like a tantrum, but you don't want to respond to cravings because it reinforces that cravings lead to eating. And that's a different topic that I think Amy and I are going to do a podcast on, the cravings one, at some point in the near future. The issue is then new and persistent cravings, again, reinforcing change in the biofeedback, and specifically for highly palatable, energy dense foods. This again, high cortisol makes you crave that crap. So, or that great stuff. So dysregulation of hormones, your hunger hormone, your satiety hormone, which is your fullness hormone, insulin, serotonin in your brain, so a neurotransmitter, these are all fluctuating, and therefore you're having a lot of cravings at some time, and then another time you have really no desire to eat, your appetite and that whole equation is all dysregulated. So this is instability in hormone balance, again, for the same reasons, because the hormones that are responsible for this are obviously fluctuating a lot. No balance, no stability. So this is kind of an emergency situation in your body, you know, in terms of how it's responding to that. And then we have energy stability. So decreased energy levels during your workout. So not being able, there's going to be an element of like gas out of the tank, running out of gas, so to speak, towards the end of a workout. That's not abnormal. But when you actually just have a fatigue-based component to it, which is different, you just know, um, that's one of the signs, you know, inability to get a good pump. So maybe so this is related to the insulin resistance and cortisol issues that are going to decrease uh, your target tissues, your muscles, from receiving that message from insulin to take up that carbohydrate as glycogen. So that's related to the impaired glucose metabolism I wrote here, which can be from just prolonged deficit eating, under consuming energy on the whole, and then your body's just in a really depleted state at that point, and muscle loss is more likely, so on and so forth. So it's lingering fatigue, you know, also slow recovery between workouts. And that's really all signs that you need to start kind of gradually rebuilding calories. And that's really the biofeedback lesson. So I know I had a couple questions that were in the Facebook group that I'll rip over to. But I will say, you know, so anyways, what does this quickly look like? That's another topic. But ultimately, what it means is taking your foot off the gas pedal, which was the instruction, you know, the warning sign initially, and not appreciating what's happening. If you go from like maintaining because you're stuck at a certain calorie intake that you really theoretically shouldn't be stuck at, and then you're able to add 3, 4, 500 calories and maintain at that number, that is fantastic, because what does that actually mean? That means when I return down, I am going to be in a deficit if I'm maintaining at higher calories. The key is you got to stay there long enough. Sometimes, I mean, I've had this experience where we've successfully on the climb up to take a dieting break. Um, we had weight maintenance at a good amount of calories, and we just did not stay there long enough. And then coming back down, that person's body kind of has a little bit of a defense up. More time at higher calories is always going to be the solution for that, because it'll chase calories down and it'll chase calories back up. And more time just allows the body to normalize and get used to the fact that there is no kind of stress around this energy deficit. You know, it's pulling back on, I mean, we're not doing hopefully like regular or high intensity types of cardio on purpose on the regular anyways. That wouldn't make sense. That's really something for when you're not trying to lose fat or repair metabolism or address any of these types of things. Training would be correct. We're doing it right here in terms of paying attention to the recovery component of it and still really trying to be hyper focused on getting stronger and wanting to add muscle, right? So the walking, this is when the times when you want to upregulate your stress management, which is again not just raising calories, but it is what it is. It's what everybody, I mean, we build it into programs, it's in the group, it's what everybody, we all slack on, right? It's a self-care component. So not saying it's easy to do, but the more awareness you have around managing these things, and we track it in a Google sheet, and everybody will just submit that weekly. You know, Pearson's law says, you know, what gets measured gets managed, and what gets reported improves. So even if you're measuring it, you'll manage it better. You'll become more aware of these things, aware of changes in these things, because if you're not aware of them, how are you even going to be able to assess them or even use them as good information for your own health? And then if it's reported, you know, which I mean, that's just accountability in place around that, then you have to give that data to someone, it improves. So anyways, any questions that pop up from this one? You know, we didn't get to do this live in Facebook, but the recording will be available. Anybody can watch it. So hope you got a lot out of this, and I'll see if there's anything that popped up in the chat here. I can't even read this. Okay, so I got one here. When you take a break from dieting, I'm assuming that doesn't mean no, right? I'm assuming, yeah, start eating tons of calories of crap. So how do you break from dieting? Well, let's think about this though. That really should be that really even should be a question, kind of. And I say that only because like you don't even want to, you're never going back to that, right? So the most important thing to really understand here is that once you're in, you're in. Like it's like once you're married, you're married. Your goal is to remain married, not have a divorce, or in this case, we call it like a fat loss divorce. So that type of lifestyle isn't conducive to anything ever again, right? So the way to do this is you have to know, like you have to create some data around your eating. So if you don't have a plan at all, so I'm kind of talking to the person who's working it and has a plan and is actively and intentionally trying to make progress right now. If you're kind of just waffling, then you don't have enough controls to really even know. Like you just there's nothing to assess. There's no controls on the process, right? There's no strategy. So this is really for someone who's actively in that space of heading down, getting leaner, trying to at least, right? So they have some type of plan. And if you don't, like I said, then you have to at least whatever, take a 3-day log of the average 3 days of eating and then figure it out what it totals. Because if you're maintaining there, then you kind of have a good starting point because that's what it is. It's a starting point. And then you have to make systematic adjustments ultimately as fast as possible, but only in the context of having weight stability at each increase you make. So, for example, if you find yourself maintaining at 10 times body weight, um, this is not a good thing, right? This should be really good fat loss calories for the average person who's in good metabolic health. So if you're maintaining there and we can accept that or understand that healthy maintenance should be in this 14 to 15 range for most people, then you're really trying to get there as fast as possible. But if you went from X to Y or A to B in this case, that's adding too much calories at one time when you are not processing at that level. And that's going to be unnecessary fat gain, unnecessary digestive stress, unnecessary everything. So, but the longer, I will also say this, and that's what you're trying to do. So you're repairing on the way up, but you're not repaired. That starts when you're up. You'll have that. You can even people can lose a little bit of weight on the way up. It's not always going to be fat. Sometimes it's just actually the loss. So you don't realize how much inflammation there is from the stress of dieting that you just lose this pounds of water, right? And therefore it kind of looks like fat loss, but you're really just less stressed physiologically. Then you got to spend some time up there. The longer you've been down and depriving and depleting, the longer you have to be up, right? And if I can appreciate there's a difficulty in accepting that for people who have been long-term dieters. Carol and I have been having a discussion about this and you have someone who's been really long-term dieting, even properly, right? But just still grinding through it. If you're not paying attention to these indicators, you're gonna be in that deficit too long, and then you're gonna start the process of fat loss. All the good stuff has slowed down, and now all the bad stuff is going to rapidly accumulate, which is going to erase all the good stuff. So, um, so that's it's really very systematic. There's no real magic to it. You just have to have some management around your numbers and know what you're starting at, and then be gradually increasing those calories. I wouldn't keep increasing calories if I was gaining weight, then I'm not increasing calories again until that weight has stabilized. So you also have to appreciate not all this weight is going to be, you don't automatically assume it's bad weight. I mean, there's going to be potentially some water there that could come on temporarily and then come off. You're going to have a much likelier chance of gaining muscle as calories climb. That would be an expectation because you'll have faster strength progress in the gym, better pumps in the gym, just more productive workouts overall. Um, so, okay. So I guess that's it for this one. I'm going to go and take a look at, I'll just see if I can pull it up on my phone quickly. There was a couple questions in the group. Okay. So I wonder if I should stop the recording here. I'm actually no, I'll just leave it here. Okay. 1 second. Where is the thread? Of course, right? Doesn't come up. Oh my gosh. I can't find it. I can't find it. Okay, you guys got to give me a quick second here. Most relevant, newest activity. There it is. Okay. All right. Um, okay, so okay. Is there a recommended amount of time to be in a break in terms of weeks or months? And then how quickly do you raise calories? Do you go right to 14 times body weight or raise incrementally? So I kind of already answered the second question systematically, but intentionally. And you're not likely going to be doing it from any protein. That's going to be static in your diet. You're already consuming enough. Adding more is just becomes really basically expensive carbohydrates at that point. Your body's just going to break that down, excrete the nitrogen component, and then treat the other part of it just like it would a carbohydrate unnecessarily. So you're going to do it from carbs and fat, any combination really of the two. My preference is to do carbohydrates on training days and more fat on off days because that's kind of how I'm building out the days anyways, in terms of my preference for breaking up carbs and fats. Is there a recommended time? So this is the variable one. And there's not like a formula where it's like, hey, you were dieting for 8 weeks, you should be out for X weeks. But think of it like a car crash, the more significant the damage, the more significant the repair. I have my car getting repaired, really small thing too on my front of my bumper. And I mean, it's supposed to be a week. It's gonna be 4 weeks on Monday, right? So you never know, right? It was more significant to repair than I had anticipated, I suppose. So ultimately, you'll get indicators because you'll start to feel better. These things will start to improve. You will have an undoing of the negative biofeedback changes. So those are the things you always say to people when they start doing things right. I'm like, listen, you're going to feel better first. You're going to have more energy. You're going to sleep better. You're going to have better workouts. You're going to get stronger. You're going to have more mental clarity. You're going to have less bloating. Your digestion is going to improve. Like you're going to notice these things first before you start to see pounds disappear, right? So those are indicators that everything is moving in the right direction, that stability is being created, and that the overall stress message in your body is being decreased. This is what returns your body into a more responsive state. However, if you smack it again with a deficit too soon, well, what do you get? Right? It's kind of like, I use this analogy on a call with someone one time. I'm like, let's say you had like an abused dog from a prior owner who had a bad owner. That dog's nervous system is on defense all the time, right? Like hyper alert, not calm, untrusting, unsafe. Then you get a dog lover taking over that dog. In the beginning, it's still super threatened. And then there's a coaxing, right? And there's a prodding, and there's a care, and there's love, and there's consistency. You can't test it too soon because that isn't solidified yet. And then you have a reaction of untrust again. And the same things occur earlier than previously. This is what has happened when we have a person that we have brought back down too early. Oh, let's test the deficit. Okay, this is too soon. We need to stay up longer, and we'll go back down later. So then you have more time, more time, more time, more time. And eventually you've kind of rebuilt that dog's trust, and there's really no reactivity, there's no trembling, there's none of that. That is a time game specifically. So while there's no formula, you can appreciate the longer you've been dieting. It doesn't matter if you say, well, I can't do this, I need to do this right now. It doesn't matter if you want to. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. The only way to restore your body to the ability to lose fat is to go through a climbing of calories and spending time there. That is the only way it works. That's it. So as fast as possible, but systematically. And I like weight stability as my barometer for whether it's good to go. I lost a thread again. Hold on a quick second. And then I got, Dana had one here for me. I hope that answers your question, Stacy. Okay. CNS fatigue. Well, I get the gist. It's not something I really know anything about. Um, okay, so this is basically just when the command center is overwhelmed. So this is another variable actually that I would say that I could have added to my we don't track this, but I used to ask this question on and say, what is your motivation to train? And motivation to train is really nicely tied to CNS fatigue, which is just central nervous system fatigue. So command center is tired. So all the other indicators and all the stress components. So you can have this occur because of overtraining, too much intensity, too much volume over time, just not recovering, not appreciating there's another side of the coin that is an equal part of the progress over time. Could be due to life and situational stress and overwhelm and just kind of running out of just mental steam. That just gives you less resources because, again, it's all, whether it's physiological or whether it's stuff that just affects our thought processes, it still has a similar physical reaction in the body in terms of hormone response. So motivation to train is a great way of watching for that, and that usually will also indicate maybe just a little bit of foot off the gas. Sometimes that could be a deload for someone. Oftentimes, I like taking planned days off, taking a week off. We do it every 3 months, right? Every week 13, we have some options there just to take the break right there. So, but that also would be, a good indicator if you're looking at training feedback that would go alongside with like not necessarily plateauing in strength. I would also say, if you're losing a notable amount of strength, that would also be a big red flag because you shouldn't be. We want to gain strength when we're training well, but ultimately, if you're not losing strength and you're maintaining your strength all the way through, then that's success. So the gains are bonuses, but that's success. So look at it as a connection to motivation to train. So when this is tired, you're going to just get weak signals all through everything. And then you have a cascade effect. Doesn't just affect one thing. Your thyroid is affected, your insulin function's affected, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, neurotransmitters in your brain, cortisol. So all interconnected. And then I think, so what about losing weight too slowly, like 2 pounds a month, red flag, or need to reduce calories? So that's not really enough information to really dive into that question, but I respond, I said, how much do you feel is not slowly? The answer was 2 pounds per week, which is not realistic to maintain an 8 pounds per month rate of weight loss, especially if you have any type of dieting history or are in this peri plus age. Not to say that you can't have 2 pounds per week times, but that's not a consistent rate of weight loss. And it's even focusing on the wrong thing. It's really gauging your success based on how fast you're losing weight. And that's kind of like gauging success on how fast you can get married and not really considering that's not even the point, right? So the point is everything else behind it. So you have to appreciate simply that everyone's a bit different. It takes time, but ultimately your body is a collection of time, habits, and consistency. So if you're doing things right, you know, and I'm thinking of Kara right now because I've posted her pictures, but it's been a journey. But I said to her in the beginning, because she started in a pretty rough place. If you do things right consistently long enough, that will change. It's a coaxing. It's not, you have these metabolic things happen. Scott Abel always said, force the body and it reacts, coax the body and it responds. So when you're pushing in and ignoring the signs and you crash, that's a reaction. There's an immediate problem and you ain't losing fat no matter what you want. Whereas the coaxing is the repair. It takes time. It's easy to undo it, takes time to redo it. So um I think there was a sugar question here. What is your approach to sugar based on the choices I've seen in Amy's meal choices? Sugar is okay as a post-workout carb, but otherwise it's avoided. For example, she choose. I wouldn't say it's an intentional avoidance. I mean, honestly, overall, if you had a diet that was high in sugar, it's just not good. Yeah, like I wouldn't say that's a representation of our thought process on sugar, but yeah, I don't. Can you explain the thought pro? I just think you haven't seen enough of Amy's concoctions. Sometimes there's some stuff in there too, but there's just no nutrient value in there. So it's not like there's an intentional, like right now, for example, we're doing this 30-day 5 things. We used to do a 5 for 50, 5 things that we're committing to for 50 days. We did 5 for 30 with our kids. And Amy and I both have a zero sugar one in place right now, just for something to do there. And I don't really want to have a lot of overall lifestyle based sugar in my diet. I'm not ever going to be an exclusionary like this, but I really consider it to be really in alignment with how I'm trying to eat for myself over time. So there's times for that and there's times not for it. And so as a regular thing on a daily basis, I'm not intentionally, I don't really have that in my diet, right? So um not terrible for you, not great for you. It's just one of these things. Some is fine. Everything's a devil in the dose type of thing, but we're not like anti-sugar at all. Trust me, I love the sugar. Right. So okay, I think that's it, everybody. I don't think I have anything else in the chat. It's too bad we didn't get to do this in Facebook, but
We'll figure it out.
yeah, we'll figure it out. Amy will figure it out. I won't figure it out. So I hope you guys got something of value out of this. And wait, there's something more there. Hold on, let me see this. Wait, I got another question. Jamie, okay, wait, I have 2 more questions. The templates are for weight loss. Are there templates for maintenance? My gym weight going up, but my body weight is static. Have hormone, thyroid issues, and inflammation, thinking I need to eat more to grow muscle and quit thinking about my fluff. I'm skinny fat. So the templates are where we would start anybody because 11 times body weight is a sweet spot fat loss calorie intake. If you have a healthy metabolism, a decent functioning metabolism, you're going to maintain in this 14 to 15 times body weight range. That's just the way the numbers fall. So 11 is a good theoretical starting point to see if you're in a good spot to move forward or not. So if you are making progress at 11, good. You still got to be watching for the changes. If you're not at 11, not good. That's an adaptation. If you're gaining at 11, really bad. Really, really bad. That's emergency time. So there isn't a template for maintenance. You would basically simply need to work your way up. I would not go from 11 right to a maintenance template, even if there was one, but you're adding essentially whatever your weight is. Let's say, well, if you were, well, you're adding from 11 to 14, let's say. So, and you're going to do that systematically, like I explained, but you'll have to just add the calories to get to maintenance. And then you're going to use your body weight as a gauge, even when you're at maintenance or when you're in a dedicated focus on wanting to add muscle and add strength, using your body weight as a gauge for your overall calorie balance and whether you should increase or not. So over time, I mean, you can recomposition at maintenance calories. If somebody's been restricted and been under consuming for time, and then they kind of get their calories up to maintenance, you can see a recompositioning there just from just the body just being in a happier state. You don't necessarily have to be in a surplus to build the muscle, but it obviously makes it a lot easier. So getting stronger, your body weight is static, hormone, thyroid issues, inflammations, right? So this is all connected. Like if you can have, I would say, when did you have the thyroid issues, right? So stress, dieting, so on and so forth, lifestyle are all going to have a likely contribution to somebody's thyroid not functioning over time or lowering its function over time. So I would be systematically increasing calories for sure. You will see a drop in inflammation with that. It's just less stressful to be eating more for your body. You have indicators obviously right now then. So they're all symptoms, right? So weight stability or an inability to lose weight. This isn't the problem for people to look at solving. There's a reason why that's happening. The problem is over there. So that's a symptom. The problem is physiological metabolism. And this is assuming you're consistent, right? Which is a large assumption a lot of the times. If you're seeing muscle gains and body reshaping and weekly PRs in the program, but no scale victories, I would call that the sweet spot. What would you think is the issue? Too little calories and metabolic issues. Well, you're not gaining muscle if you are on too little calories. You're not going to add metabolically active tissue. Your body's not going to do that in a underfed state. It would never do that. It just makes its whole survival mechanism harder. So if you are getting stronger in the gym, you're recovering. If you are, I mean, you could be seeing more muscle, but not building more muscle because you're having a recomposition effect occur in that you're maybe adding a little bit of muscle tissue while actually dropping a little bit of fat, and then ultimately ending up the same, right? So for guys, I think this is the sweet spot. I would love to lean out and build muscle and still weigh the exact same. We have different perspectives on numbers. So if that's actually happening, then I wouldn't have any problems. However, if you are, yeah, I mean, if you're reshaping, you're recomping, I wouldn't see there's an issue here. So you wouldn't be in a too low or metabolic issue state. You basically are having a good response to training, which can happen early on when you're training really effectively. I mean, you're never going to be able to recomp and sweet spot this thing for a long time. You'll either just stagnate or, or you'll stagnate really. So I would continue to watch that and see how I mean, you can gauge this by clothing. So ultimately, your body weight is a data point that, without further context, doesn't really tell you anything. You're seeing muscle gains and a body reshaping, but the number doesn't dictate. Well, if you gain 2 pounds of muscle and lost 2 pounds of fat, you'd have a 4-pound change in your physique, but you'd weigh the exact same. So unless you're looking at other data points to help you give context to the scale, that's a lesson in frustration every time at some point, right? So you would need to add, we track measurements. So we have clients track 10 measurements. And even then they have limitations because you're not limited to fat loss in 10 specifically marked spots. If we marked 10 different spots one week, we might see something totally different if the first 10 measurements didn't have any kind of measurement change, right? And then obviously we use clothing as the best indicator. So if you have fitted clothing and that's fitting better and you are the same weight, who cares? You're actually gaining muscle. And it's so freaking hard to gain muscle. And it takes such a long time to accumulate it. And it's so important from this point and on, especially that if that's actually happening for you, go you, because that's fantastic. And you will, of course, still want to be watching out for that. You're not going to have that continue. So if you are successfully running it like that, you are leaning out a little bit. If your clothes are getting better, your weight's the same, you're adding some muscle. The novelty of being able to do that is going to disappear physiologically. And then you would be able to, then your target is really muscle maintenance, and you'd start to see a downward trend on the scale if all of my assumptions are correct. So, um, yeah, Kara, right, exactly. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Right. And people are commenting on my physique changes with no scale changes. Exactly. Right. So you're in the ultimate spot right now. Um, I wouldn't I would just be happy about that. That's a sweet spot. Amy just said jealous. Okay. All right. I think we got it. All right, ladies. Hope you guys learned something. And I will see you guys in the group. Any follow-up questions on all this biofeedback stuff, just when we post the thread, then just ask me. We'll help you out. Okay. Talk to you soon.